Here is investigation area number 93.
Irma, the new tropical storm, is likely to be a long-lived hurricane.
Irma is likely to strengthen over the next few days.
And this hurricane's bringing everything: high winds, storm surge, potential heavy rain, inland flooding, and tornadoes.
You can see it's still a very strong Category 5 hurricane.
Get prepared. Learn your evacuation zone.
All of Levy County is now under a mandatory evacuation order.
Winds up to 160 miles per hour will likely make landfall somewhere near southwest Florida.
But now being absolutely hammered by this eye wall.
Look at how large the wind field is.
The entire peninsula, east to west, is at a bare minimum going to experience tropical storm force winds, and the majority of the peninsula may end up with hurricane force winds.
The storm that was once Hurricane Irma is churning into the deep south tonight after moving up the entire peninsula of Florida.
Tonight, the bill for Irma is adding up fast into the billions.
Florida legislatures, they're even warning it could require some tough budget choices next year.
17 named storms, 10 of them hurricanes, 3 that devastated parts of the U.S. Harvey in Texas, Maria in Puerto Rico, and Irma here in Florida.
The season as a whole last year was what we call hyperactive. It was well above normal for the number of storms that formed. And what made last year particularly interesting and unique and even record-setting is how strong the storms were.
While Irma didn't hit the entire state with Category 4 or 5 winds like it did in the Keys, it still brought devastating effects. 84 deaths in Florida, knocked out power for nearly 7 million households, and cost property owners more than $8.6 billion in damages, including $2.5 billion to the agriculture industry.
So that was what was unique about 2017. It was the historic cost of the damage and how widespread it was.
All of this forcing state lawmakers to take some sort of action. In response to Irma, Speaker of the Florida House Richard Corcoran established the Hurricane Response Preparedness Committee last year.
Good afternoon. We'll call the Select Committee on Hurricane Response and Preparedness to order.
So what we did is we put together a select committee to look into as good as Florida is at disasters, because we have to deal with it every single year. As good as we are and prepared as we are, there's always improvements that can be made.
The results from that committee? 78 recommendations for the 2018 legislative session that lawmakers said would help protect the state against future natural disasters. Recommendations in areas like education, healthcare, utilities, and transportation and evacuation. But only 27 of those items were acted upon, mostly as simple funding projects within the $88.7 billion state budget. Included was a $170 million tax package, which gave tax breaks for farm repairs, property tax breaks for damaged homes, and a week-long tax holiday for storm-related gear. But one of the biggest changes was Governor Rick Scott forcing nursing homes to have backup power following several deaths at a South Florida facility. We've followed up with local residents to find out how nursing homes, farms, and local homeowners have adjusted and recovered since Hurricane Irma hit Florida 9 months ago.
911, what is your emergency?
Yes, hi. I'm calling from Hollywood Hill Nursing Rehab. The patient is here on the second floor. I'm having a respiratory problem with her.
The patient was on cardiac arrest.
He's having difficulty breathing.
Because we don't have any air conditions. I realize that she's not breathing. So we're doing CPR now. Okay. She was born 1933. She's 84.
Tragedy at a nursing home. 8 senior citizens are dead after the facility lost air conditioning as a result of Hurricane Irma.
12 nursing home deaths in Broward County have just been ruled as homicides. Investigators say those people died of heat exposure.
95-year-old Francesca Andrade died as well. The deaths bringing the total number of storm-related deaths at that center to 14.
Following 12 of those 14 deaths being ruled as homicides at a Hollywood, Florida nursing home, Scott issued an emergency rule requiring all facilities to have backup power. Nursing homes were forced to install alternative power sources, such as generators, within 60 days. They also had to have enough fuel on hand to power them for 96 hours, or else face a $1,000 per day fine. State lawmakers later lowered it from 96 hours to 72.
This is one of our living rooms. We're a 2-story facility. We do have an elevator.
Ted Roberts first opened his small 14-bedroom nursing home in Gainesville last year on
June 1st,
the very first day of hurricane season. And when he saw Hurricane Irma headed for the state,
I made the decision fairly early on to evacuate the resident. I didn't want anybody here.
When he first heard about the governor's emergency generator rule, Ted thought it was a good idea.
Because everything in the facility has to be safety oriented.
But worried the time constraints could be hard on budgets and lead to cutting corners. He was able to get an extension, so after 5 to 6 months and about $22,000 later,
this is the big shebang here.
He got his generator, which was above and beyond the new state requirements. And while other nursing homes across the state will now hopefully be able to prevent what happened in that South Florida facility, Ted says it's something that should have never happened in the first place.
When one sits in a room or in a facility or wherever it may be, the thought must go through one's head that, boy, it's getting kind of hot in here. I need to do something with my residents.
Drive about a mile off the beaten path in Marion County, just outside Citra, and once you hear the bell, the cats, and of course, the chickens, you know you've reached your destination, Crone's Cradle Conserve. The 700-acre preserve seems to have it all. Pick your plants.
Rosemary and Cuban
oregano.
Cuban oregano.
Some vegetables and homemade jam, or maybe
Mommy, look at this walking stick.
a souvenir. But for months last year, this peaceful farm was without any business.
In fact, in many ways, Hurricane Irma was worse than the ones that came in 2004.
When WUFT last visited Crone's Cradle in the days following Hurricane Irma, about 2 feet of water covered the entire farm.
We had to use a canoe to go from that high point of land all the way down to our greenhouse. It affected our business because we had no produce to sell.
Crone's Cradle wasn't alone. The state's overall agriculture industry suffered an estimated $2.5 billion in losses from Irma. So Congress approved a storm relief package that included more than $2.3 billion for Florida's farmers. But Crone's Cradle didn't apply for any of that money. Jerry says she didn't want to accept what she called a government handout.
I felt like as long as we could, we would take care of our own losses. Good old Southern hard-headedness, I guess, is what you might have to call that.
Jerry says that, yes, they're making preparations for this year's hurricanes, like considering better generators and increasing their solar power usage. But whether it's hurricane season or not,
I wish people would come out and visit with us and sit here on the porch and rock and see what it feels like to feel part of the earth.
We're gonna take good care of them.
Many Gainesville area families are trapped at home after Hurricane Irma, have already seen the big trees removed or water recede from neighborhood driveways.
No such luck for one Alachua County family with a foot of water indoors.
So all of this was completely flooded.
Luisa Pena and her family were woken up the morning Hurricane Irma swept through Gainesville, but not from the wind.
It was about 5 o'clock in the morning when my son comes in and says, water's rushing into my room and it's about to my ankles. So we went down and sure enough, the water was just, gushing in.
Her home in the hills of Santa Fe neighborhood was flooded with more than 4 feet of water.
The only way that we could come in and out of our house was through the use of a canoe.
Luisa says her damage totaled around
probably a good $60,000 in my home. Everything we had in here was lost, and about $20,000 in personal items.
Here we are going to have the eye of Hurricane Irma very close to Cedar Key.
When Irma finally made its way up to north central Florida, it didn't bring the powerful Category 4 or 5 winds of 150 miles per hour like it did in parts of the Keys in South Florida. But what it did bring was lots and lots of rain. For people like David Dobbins, who live along the Santa Fe River, that meant he faced water that rose 15 feet in the 36 hours after Irma when WUFT met with him in September.
Most of the time with any kind of flood, we have time, to react, but not this time.
But those not even close to a major river were also met with flooding. Multiple residents who lived in a northwest Gainesville neighborhood called Robin Lane were flooded so badly they still haven't returned to their homes more than 9 months after Irma.
I was speechless, nothing really brings me to tears, but I was, in tears. My whole family was. It's hard to see everything just wiped away.
But this type of flooding for both the Hills of Santa Fe and Robin Lane neighborhoods is nothing new. Residents say the 2004 hurricane season brought the same type of flooding.
You know, it was just, devastating, to be honest, because when I bought my house in 2006, I knew that there had been a flood here in 2004, yet I was told that the problem had been taken care of.
More than a decade later, residents from both neighborhoods are still asking the county to do something about it.
Oh, this will never happen again. It was a freaky thing. Well, now look, it's happened again.
The flooding is not just a one home. It's streets, it's areas, it's neighborhoods that are flooded out. Yes, we got a lot of rain. Yes, we got a hurricane. But if there was proper infrastructure and if some of these buildings were not built and the lands were not stripped, we wouldn't have to flood, and it is a county issue.
Ramsey, Touchberry, WUFT News.